Welcome to Marking the End Times. I'm Mark Hitchcock, and it's great to have you with us as always. We appreciate so much you spending time to watch these videos. I know you're busy, and everybody is. We have a lot of things to do, and the fact that you'd take 10 to 20 minutes of your time to watch these videos and these questions and answers really means a lot to me, and I know it means a lot to Jimmy and all of us here at endtimes.com. So thank you so much for being a part of this ministry. In a little bit, I'm going to go and answer some questions. We're going to the subscriber only section. But what I want to talk about today is something that's happening right now that's I think monumental of setting the stage for the end times. That's this idea of Israel and Saudi Arabia normalizing relations, having some kind of really a peace deal or a peace treaty between them. This has unbelievable prophetic ramifications for the coming of the Antichrist and this peace treaty, this peace deal that he's going to forge between Israel and her neighbors in the end time. So I want to talk about some things that are happening today that I think are lining up perfectly with what the Bible predicts. And then, as I said a few minutes ago, we'll go into the Q&A session for the subscribers. And I'm going to answer a question about when is the judgment seat of Christ going to take place? The judgment seat of Christ is mentioned, that Bema judgment in 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 10. And the question is, when will those who are raptured appear before the judgment seat of Christ? So we'll answer that question. Then a couple of questions about kind of more distant into the future. When will believers alive on earth during the millennium receive their glorified bodies? When do people who live in a non-glorified body during the millennium, when do they get their glorified body? And then one final question, when the new heaven and new earth are created, where will the new Jerusalem be and where will believers live during that time? So some great questions about the future, really that give us a lot of hope. We need hope in these times in which we live, and we need to look forward to the rapture and to the millennium and to the new heaven and the new earth. But I want to get right to our topic here for today, and that is this peace deal that keeps being talked about between Saudi Arabia and Israel. One of the key events of the end times is a coming peace treaty between Israel and her neighbors, a peace treaty that's brokered by the coming Antichrist. We hear about this and read about this in Daniel 9:27. It says, and he, if you look in the previous verse, the context there, the he is the coming prince. This is the Antichrist. He will confirm a covenant with many for 1/7. 1/7 means one set of 7 years. And in the middle of the 7, that's at the 3.5-year point, he'll put an end to sacrifice and offering. And at the temple, he'll set up an abomination that causes desolation. There's a lot to unpack in this verse, but it's saying that the Antichrist is going to come and he's going to make a covenant or a treaty with the many in Israel for a 7-year period of time. And then in the middle of that 7 years, he's going to put an end to sacrifice and offering. Well, if he's going to put an end to sacrifice and offering, which can only happen in a rebuilt temple, then that means there has to be a temple and there had to be sacrifices, right, for him to end them. And at the temple, he'll set up an abomination that causes desolation. That is, the Antichrist will go into this temple, be seated there, declare that he's God, and then he'll have an image of himself placed there that people have to worship as God in order to be able to buy or to sell. But the first part of this passage tells us that he'll confirm a covenant with Israel for 7 years. Now, translations are different here. Some say he'll confirm a covenant. Some say he will make a covenant, or you could translate it, will compel a covenant. But like the English Standard Version has, he'll make a strong covenant. So there's different ways to translate this. Some take it he's going to confirm a covenant or make strong a covenant that already exists. Others take it he's going to come and compel this covenant. In other words, he's going to bring the parties to the table and give them a take it or leave it deal. And others say it's going to be the covenant that's strong. But whatever the exact meaning, there's one thing that's clear here, and that is the Antichrist is going to forge a sweeping peace agreement between Israel and her neighbors. It's going to have to do with the Temple Mount area in Israel renewing their sacrifices there. But recent events strikingly foreshadow this coming peace compact that's critical to the end times, because this peace covenant between the Antichrist and Israel, that's the event that starts the 7-year tribulation. A lot of people have this wrong idea that the rapture starts the 7-year tribulation. The rapture ends the church age. The rapture is going to end this current age. Now, obviously, the rapture could take place and this peace treaty could be signed the same day. Or it may be a week later, a month later, it could be a year later. We don't know when it will happen. But the rapture ends the church age. This peace treaty or covenant begins that final 7 years known as the tribulation period. Now, it's fascinating to me. Think about this. Just this last Sunday on August 13th, that was the third anniversary of the announcement of the Abraham Accords. The Abraham Accords were announced on August the 13th, 2020, and they were ratified the following month. And these arrangements really heralded a new beginning of peace in the Middle East as several Arab nations agreed to normalize relations with Israel. The previous 5 American presidents tried everything they could with Palestinian leaders and they failed. But the Abraham Accords broke that streak. And it's interesting, the Bible predicts the tribulation starts with a covenant between the Antichrist and Israel. And what have people yearned for and what have U.S. presidents sought and labored for over and over again? Peace with Israel and their neighbors. But finally, that streak was broken with these Abraham Accords. The United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan all signed peace treaties or normalized relations with Israel. Now, that was added to what happened in 1979. Israel signed a peace treaty with Egypt, and in 1994, they signed a peace treaty with Jordan. So that brings the total to these 6 nations. But the big fish here is clearly Saudi Arabia. Prime Minister Netanyahu in Israel has called normalization of relations with Saudi Arabia and Israel the deal of the century. Now, this last week, a top Israeli diplomat said this: a normalization agreement would be a historic opportunity for a peace process that will change the face of the Middle East and the whole world. That's a dramatic statement in light of Bible prophecy. It's going to begin a peace process that will change the face of the Middle East and the world. So a lot of headlines now about this. I just want to read a few of these to you. They're very striking to me. The Times of Israel, there's 3 from the Times of Israel. The first one says, Foreign Minister Cohen, that's the Foreign Minister of Israel, said this to an Arab outlet, said Israel will make gestures to Palestinians for the Saudi deal. So Israel's willing to make some concessions to the Palestinians to make this deal happen. Here's another headline from the Times of Israel. Any deal must be done before Biden leaves office, Israel reportedly tells the Saudis. So they believe this is going to have to happen before President Biden leaves office, which obviously doesn't give a lot of time, about a year. Another headline from the Times of Israel says, leading Saudi columnist says it's highly likely peace with Israel is possible. So this is, again, someone in Saudi Arabia saying this. Now, one article that kind of really got everyone's attention this last week was from the Wall Street Journal. Says Saudis agree with U.S. on path to normalize kingdom's ties with Israel. And the subtitle says, officials are negotiating details of an agreement they hope to cement within 9 to 12 months, though obstacles remain. The U.S. wants to wrap all of this up by next March. And, one of the reasons, obviously, you can imagine is political reasons. This would be a huge feather in the cap for President Biden to be able to somehow be in the middle of this or to take credit for it. Now, others say there's no fixed timetable. Now, there are several serious obstacles to all of this. One is the current turmoil in Israel. Some think Saudi Arabia is kind of going to wait on the sidelines till Israel can get things kind of internally figured out. And of course, the other major obstacle, as always, is the Palestinian question. What's going to happen with the Palestinians? What's Israel going to have to give up? What's Saudi Arabia going to demand to have normalized relations? Now, one thing that's fascinating just happened this last week. Saudi Arabia's ambassador to Jordan presented his credentials last Saturday to begin also serving as Saudi Arabia's first ever non-resident ambassador to Palestine. So there's now a Saudi Arabian ambassador to the Palestinians. And some people believe that this is kind of just a nod or kind of checking a box with the Palestinians before normalizing relations with Israel. Let me read what happened or what was written in the New York Times. says Saudi Arabia has appointed its first envoy to the Palestinian administration in the Israeli-occupied West Bank, a move widely seen as linked to efforts led by the United States to forge diplomatic ties between Saudi Arabia and Israel. The announcement came amid escalating efforts by the United States to establish formal relations for the first time between Israel and Saudi Arabia. It also followed speculation in Israel that Saudi Arabia, which has long opposed enacting formal ties until the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has been resolved, might now be prepared to do so without Israel's providing the Palestinians with greater autonomy. So the fact that Saudi Arabia has placed this ambassador, this envoy in the Palestinian Authority area is seen maybe as them kind of backing off, that they're going to make some kind of demands that Israel give the Palestinians greater autonomy. So this opens the door and paves the way in a greater way for this agreement between Israel and Saudi Arabia to take place. Now, part of this is about China as well. As part of the agreement, the U.S. wants Saudi Arabia to roll back some of its growing ties with China, which of course would help the United States. So there's a lot of moving parts to an agreement. And so, look, this peace process between Israel and Saudi Arabia is complicated. It's fraught with difficulties. But the fact we're even talking about this, to me, is astounding. I mean, who would have believed a few years ago this would even be a possibility at all? But here we are with the prophetic scenario lining up. And the next event on God's prophetic calendar, we all know, is the rapture of the church. But sometime after the rapture, the Antichrist is going to catapult onto the world scene. And his major breakthrough will be to broker and to forge this comprehensive peace deal for Israel that allows the Jews to rebuild the temple and offer sacrifices. I think the Antichrist will probably get the Nobel Peace Prize. He'll be Times Person of the Year. Now, we're not there yet, but here on the third anniversary of these Abraham Accords, with momentum building for peace between Saudi Arabia and Israel, the stage is more set than ever before. I mean, this is something people in past generations only dreamed about. So all that remains now is for the rapture to take place. Now, the rapture will move, I think, the final pieces into place as the Antichrist will rise into chaos and the aftermath of the rapture to bring calm. And part of that will be this Middle East peace deal. So what we're witnessing right now is the setup for that coming treaty. It's happening right before our eyes. And I don't know about you, but I just consider it a great privilege to live in these times. I mean, it's incredible to see the things we're seeing that are prophesied so clearly in the Bible. My prayer for myself and for all of us is that we'll live faithfully in light of the rapture, because all the signs are pointing to it coming very soon. Well, let's go now into the Q&A session, and I want to answer a question again about the timing of the judgment seat of Christ. A question about the New Jerusalem, the new heaven and new earth, and how those relate to one another, where we'll be during that time. And then when do people in non-glorified bodies living on earth during the millennium, when will they get their glorified bodies? So we'll go into that time of Q&A. If you're not a subscriber to endtimes.com, you can go to endtimes.com, and for $7 a month, you can become a subscriber, and you'll have access to all kinds of great information. We'd appreciate your fellowship together with us in that.